Welcome to Hidden Coin Digest, where ordinary pocket change reveals extraordinary treasures, forgotten history, and life-changing discoveries. Before you spend another quarter, I want you to do something very simple. Reach into your pocket, your wallet, or that old coin jar sitting somewhere in your home, and pull out the first quarter you can find. Hold it in your hand for just a moment. Now ask yourself one question. What if that ordinary-looking coin wasn't worth just 25 cents? What if that single quarter could be worth hundreds of dollars, thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars? It sounds unbelievable, almost like something out of a movie. But for collectors across the United States, stories exactly like this have become reality. Hidden among billions of ordinary quarters are a handful of extraordinary coins. With rare minting mistakes, exceptional preservation, or fascinating histories that have transformed them into some of the most sought-after modern collectibles. In the numismatic world, every year, people unknowingly spend valuable coins at grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, restaurants, and coffee shops. Others toss them into coin-counting machines without ever realizing what they had. But every now and then, someone takes a closer look, and that simple decision changes everything. Imagine opening an old wooden box that belonged to your grandfather. Inside are a few faded photographs, some old letters, and a handful of loose coins that haven't been touched for decades. Among them sits a worn Washington quarter that looks no different from the millions of others produced during the 1980s. Most people would glance at it for only a second before dropping it back into the box. A collector would do something completely different. They would examine the date, study the mint mark, inspect the edge, look carefully at the lettering, search for tiny doubling, check the weight, and sometimes, just sometimes, that ordinary-looking quarter turns out to be something truly extraordinary. Today, we're exploring 3 Washington quarters that continue to surprise collectors decades after they were first released into circulation in 1984, 1985, and 1989. Washington quarters. Millions of these coins were minted. Millions were spent. Millions disappeared into everyday circulation. Yet hidden among them are remarkable examples that have sold for astonishing prices because of rare mint errors, exceptional condition, and fascinating varieties that many people still don't know exist. The most exciting part: some of these coins may still be circulating today. They could be hiding in an old piggy bank, inside a forgotten coin collection, mixed into a bankroll, or even resting quietly inside your own pocket at this very moment. Throughout this video, we'll uncover the hidden stories behind these remarkable quarters, explore the rare minting errors that collectors search for, reveal surprising auction results, and show you exactly what to look for before you spend another coin, because sometimes the difference between an ordinary quarter and an extraordinary treasure isn't obvious at first glance. Sometimes it's a tiny minting mistake, almost invisible to the naked eye. Sometimes it's an unusually sharp strike. Sometimes it's a rare variety that only experienced collectors recognize. And sometimes it's simply a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right coin in your hand. So before you empty your pockets or cash in that old jar of spare change, stay with us until the very end. The final coin we'll discuss has surprised even experienced collectors, and the details you learn today could completely change the way you look at every Washington quarter you receive from now on. If you love hidden treasures, rare coins, unbelievable auction discoveries, and the thrill of finding something extraordinary hiding in plain sight, you're in exactly the right place. Now, let's begin our journey with the fascinating story of the 1984 Washington quarter. The year 1984 wasn't considered special by most Americans when it came to pocket change. Every day, banks received fresh rolls of quarters. Cashiers handed them out without a second thought. And millions of people spent them on everything from groceries to arcade games. No one stopped to imagine that decades later, collectors would carefully inspect those same coins under bright lights, searching for tiny details that could transform an ordinary quarter into an extraordinary treasure. The United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of Washington quarters in 1984. Most were struck exactly as intended, meeting every quality standard before entering circulation. Because of such enormous production numbers, the average person assumes every 1984 quarter is common and worth nothing more than its face value. But experienced collectors know something most people don't. Large mintages don't always mean valuable coins can't exist. Sometimes the rarest treasures are hiding among the most common coins ever produced. The secret lies in knowing exactly what to look for. Imagine walking into your local bank and asking for $100 in quarters. The teller hands you several tightly wrapped rolls filled with ordinary-looking coins. Most people would immediately spend them or feed them into a coin-counting machine. A collector does something completely different. They slowly open each roll. One coin at a time, turning every quarter beneath a bright light, looking closely at George Washington's portrait, studying every letter, examining every number, checking the edge, searching for anything unusual. Hours may pass before finding something interesting. Sometimes nothing appears at all. But every experienced collector understands one important rule. You only need one remarkable discovery to make all that searching worthwhile. One unusual strike, one overlooked mint error, one perfectly preserved coin. That's all it takes. Now, let's talk about condition, because condition alone can completely transform the value of a 1984 Washington quarter. When a coin first leaves the mint, it possesses an incredible brilliance known as mint luster. Under direct light, that surface creates a beautiful cartwheel effect as the coin moves from side to side. It's a characteristic impossible to recreate once the coin begins circulating. Unfortunately, circulation is unforgiving. Every trip through a cash register leaves tiny contact marks. Every ride inside a pocket allows coins to scrape against keys, other coins, and countless hard surfaces. Every fall onto concrete leaves another tiny scar. Those marks may seem insignificant individually, but over 40 years, they slowly erase the coin's original beauty. That's why high-grade examples are becoming increasingly difficult to find. Today, collectors aren't simply paying for a quarter, they're paying for preservation. They're paying for history frozen in time. A beautiful mint state coin looks almost exactly as it did on the day it left the United States Mint more than 4 decades ago. Finding one is far more difficult than most people realize. Some survived because collectors stored them immediately. Others remained untouched inside original bank rolls. A few were forgotten inside old safety deposit boxes where they rested for decades before finally being rediscovered. Every one of those survival stories adds another layer of fascination. But now comes the part that excites collectors even more. Mint errors. Inside the United States Mint, enormous presses strike coins with incredible force. Thousands of quarters are produced every hour. The process is highly accurate, yet no manufacturing system is perfect. Occasionally, tiny mechanical problems occur. Sometimes grease fills part of the die, preventing certain details from striking properly. Other times, the dies begin wearing out after producing thousands upon thousands of coins. Small cracks appear. Fine details weaken. Occasionally, The metal blank enters the press slightly out of position. In rare situations, a coin may even be struck on the wrong placket altogether. These mistakes were never supposed to leave the mint. Yet every year, a small number somehow escaped quality control. Those escaped errors are exactly what collectors dream about finding today. One fascinating variety involves double design elements. Under magnification, experienced collectors carefully inspect the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date. True doubling isn't caused by wear or damage. It originates during the creation of the die itself. That means every coin struck from that particular die carries the exact same unusual characteristics. Some examples display only slight separation visible under magnification. Others reveal dramatic doubling obvious enough to catch the attention of advanced collectors almost immediately. Whenever a genuine double die variety appears on the market, excitement spreads quickly throughout the collecting community because these discoveries don't happen every day. And they certainly don't remain available for long. Another remarkable error involves off-center strikes. Imagine printing a photograph only to discover the paper shifted before the image appeared. Instead of everything being perfectly centered, part of the picture is missing. The same thing can happen during coin production. If a blank placket isn't positioned correctly inside the striking chamber, the design lands off-center. Some off-center errors are small, others are dramatic, enough to leave a large blank area on one side of the coin. Collectors especially value examples where the entire date remains visible despite the shifted strike. Those pieces combine rarity with unmistakable visual appeal. They immediately stand out from ordinary coins. And that's exactly what makes them desirable. The next thing experienced collectors always examine is the edge of the coin. Most people never pay attention to it, but sometimes the edge reveals secrets long before the front or back does. A standard-clad Washington quarter should display a thin copper-colored stripe between its outer nickel layers. If that appearance looks unusual, collectors begin asking questions. Could the coin be missing a clad layer? Was it struck on an incorrect placket? Could it represent a rare minting anomaly? Sometimes the answer is no, but occasionally the answer changes everything. Sometimes the answer changes everything. That is exactly why experienced collectors never rush when examining a coin. They know patience often leads to remarkable discoveries. A coin that appears completely ordinary at first glance may reveal something extraordinary after only a few minutes of careful inspection. One of the first tools many collectors purchase isn't an expensive coin. It's a simple magnifying loupe. Under magnification, an entirely different world begins to appear. Tiny die cracks become visible. Small areas of doubling suddenly stand out. Fine details that seem perfectly normal to the naked eye may actually tell a completely different story. Now imagine discovering a 1984 quarter that has remained untouched for decades. The coin still flashes with brilliant mint luster. George Washington's portrait appears razor sharp. Every strand of hair remains clearly defined. The lettering is bold. The rim is strong. Even the smallest details inside the eagle's feathers remain crisp. Finding a coin in that condition today is far more difficult than many people realize. Every year, thousands of high-grade coins disappear forever. Some become damaged. Others are cleaned improperly. Many simply continue circulating until all their original beauty is lost. That's exactly why surviving premium examples continue attracting serious attention whenever they appear on the market. Professional grading companies carefully study every surface before assigning a final grade. To most people, two quarters may appear identical. To experienced graders, however, the smallest difference matters. A single contact mark across Washington's cheek, a tiny scratch inside the field, a faint disturbance in the mint luster. Each of these details can reduce the final grade, and sometimes one grading point makes the difference between an ordinary collectible and a truly exceptional rarity. Collectors understand this better than anyone. That's why beautifully preserved examples often create intense bidding whenever they appear at major auctions. But condition isn't the only reason collectors chase these coins. History plays an equally important role. Every 1984 Washington quarter witnessed a fascinating journey through American life. Some traveled across the country inside delivery trucks, others passed through casinos, grocery stores, movie theaters, gas stations, amusement parks, and shopping malls. Many were carried inside wallets for years before eventually disappearing into change jars. Some remained forgotten inside dresser drawers. Others spent decades hidden inside family collections without anyone realizing their potential. Every coin carries its own silent history. If only coins could speak, imagine the stories they could tell. One quarter may have purchased a child's first ice cream. Another may have been part of someone's first paycheck. Another may have traveled through dozens of different states before finally resting inside an old coffee can for 30 years. That invisible history gives every coin its own unique character. And sometimes it also preserves extraordinary value. Now let's discuss another feature that collectors never ignore: the mint mark. Although many beginners overlook it, experienced collectors always check immediately. A tiny letter beneath the date tells an important story. If your coin carries a D, it was struck at the Denver Mint. If there is no mint mark, it was produced in Philadelphia. Both facilities manufactured enormous numbers of Washington quarters during 1984. Yet subtle differences between production runs continue fascinating specialists today. Collectors frequently compare strike quality, surface appearance, and known die varieties from each mint. Some dies remained in service longer than others. As they wore down, tiny changes began appearing on newly struck coins. These differences may seem insignificant, yet advanced collectors spend years documenting them. Some even build complete collections dedicated entirely to die varieties from a single year. That's how deep the hobby becomes. The more you learn, the more fascinating every ordinary coin appears. Another characteristic worth examining is the edge reading. Most Washington quarters display evenly spaced grooves around the edge. If those grooves appear weak, interrupted, or unusually formed, further inspection becomes worthwhile. Sometimes, these unusual characteristics result from circulation damage. Other times, they point toward genuine minting abnormalities. This is exactly why collectors avoid making quick decisions. Every unusual feature deserves careful examination before reaching any conclusion. One mistake many beginners make is cleaning old coins. At first glance, cleaning seems like a good idea. After all, shiny coins look more attractive. Unfortunately, collectors see things very differently. Original surfaces are incredibly important. Even gentle polishing removes microscopic layers of metal that can never be replaced. Professional graders immediately recognize clean coins. Instead of increasing value, cleaning often reduces it dramatically. That's why experienced collectors follow one simple rule. If you believe you've discovered something unusual, leave it exactly as you found it. Never polish it. Never scrub it. Never attempt to improve its appearance. Sometimes decades of natural aging are exactly what collectors hope to see. The coin tells its own story. Removing that history can never be undone. Now imagine this scenario. A family begins cleaning out an old house that has belonged to their grandparents for generations. Inside a dusty cabinet sits a heavy glass jar filled with forgotten coins. No one has opened it in years. Most people would simply carry the jar to a coin counting machine. But one family member decides to take a closer look. They slowly pour the coins onto a table. Nickels, dimes, pennies, quarters, hundreds of them. Hours pass as each coin is inspected one by one. Most are ordinary. Then suddenly, one quarter catches the light differently than the others. The surfaces remain unusually brilliant. The strike appears exceptionally sharp. Every tiny detail seems stronger than expected. That single moment of curiosity begins a journey that eventually leads to professional grading, collector interest, and an auction result nobody in the family ever imagined possible. Stories like this continue inspiring collectors around the world because remarkable discoveries aren't always made by experts. Sometimes they're made by ordinary people who simply decided to look a little closer. Stories like these continue to inspire collectors because they prove one important lesson. Valuable discoveries don't always begin inside expensive collections. Quite often, they begin with ordinary people who simply take a closer look at ordinary coins. Now, let's explore one of the most fascinating parts of the 1984 Washington quarter. Its hidden mint errors. Most quarters left the United States mint exactly as they were intended. The design was sharp, the weight was correct, and every detail matched official specifications. But every once in a while, something unexpected happened inside the minting facility. A machine might lose its alignment. A die could begin developing tiny cracks. Grease might fill part of the design. Or a blank blanket could enter the press slightly out of position. Those small manufacturing mistakes created coins that looked completely different from the millions of normal quarters produced that year. One of the first things collectors search for is an off-center strike. Imagine placing a sheet of paper into a printer without lining it up correctly. Instead of printing in the center, the image appears shifted toward one side. The same thing can happen during coin production. When this happens, part of the design may be missing while a blank area appears along the edge of the coin. The more dramatic the shift, the more attention it usually receives from collectors. However, one detail is especially important. The date must still be visible. Without the date, identifying the coin becomes much more difficult, reducing collector interest. Another fascinating error involves die cracks. Minting dies experience incredible pressure every single day. After striking hundreds of thousands of coins, tiny fractures can begin forming across their surfaces. Every coin struck afterward carries those same raised lines. To most people, these lines look like random scratches. Experienced collectors know better. A genuine die crack is actually raised above the surface because it forms inside the die itself. Before the coin is struck, some die cracks remain small and almost invisible. Others continue growing until they stretch across large portions of the design. Each one tells part of the D's history. Collectors enjoy tracing these progressive stages because no two damaged dies were exactly the same. Then there are filled die errors. This occurs when grease or other material temporarily fills part of the engraved design inside the die. Instead of striking every detail clearly, certain letters or numbers may appear weak or partially missing. Someone unfamiliar with mint errors may assume the coin is simply worn. A knowledgeable collector immediately realizes something much more interesting may have happened. Weight is another important clue. A normal 1984 Washington quarter weighs approximately 5.67 grams. That tiny number means everything. Collectors often keep accurate digital scales nearby whenever searching through large groups of coins. If one quarter weighs noticeably more or less than expected, it deserves closer examination. Although many weight differences result from damage or heavy wear, occasionally they point toward a genuine mint error that requires professional authentication. Now imagine receiving several rolls of quarters directly from a local bank. Most people would never imagine those rolls could contain hidden treasures. But experienced collectors search them every day. They examine one coin after another with incredible patience. Sometimes they search hundreds of coins without finding anything unusual. Sometimes thousands. Yet every serious collector understands that remarkable discoveries are rarely predictable. One extraordinary coin can appear when you least expect it. That possibility keeps the search exciting. Perhaps the greatest thrill in coin collecting isn't simply owning valuable coins. It's discovering one yourself. Imagine noticing something unusual while examining an ordinary 1984 quarter. Maybe the strike appears unusually sharp. Perhaps the lettering seems different. The edge catches your attention. The weight isn't exactly what you expected. Curiosity takes over. You compare the coin with another 1984 quarter. The differences become even more obvious. Soon you're researching reference books, studying photographs, and comparing known varieties. Before long, the coin is sent to a professional grading service for authentication. Several weeks later, the results finally arrive. What began as an ordinary afternoon searching through loose change has suddenly become one of the most memorable moments of your collecting journey. That excitement is something every collector hopes to experience at least once. Because in the world of coin collecting, history often hides inside the smallest details. And sometimes those smallest details become the biggest discoveries. As remarkable as the 1984 Washington quarter can be, it isn't the only coin from the 1980s attracting serious collector attention. In fact, the very next year produced another Washington quarter that continues to surprise collectors even today. At first glance, it looks almost identical. Millions entered circulation. Millions were spent without a second thought. Yet hidden among those ordinary coins are examples that have generated enormous excitement throughout the collecting community. And that's exactly where our journey continues. The story of the 1985 Washington quarter begins. The story of the 1985 Washington quarter begins much like the one before it. Millions of these coins rolled off the presses at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, entered banks across the country, and quickly became part of everyday life. They paid for lunches, filled parking meters, rattled around in cash registers, and disappeared into pockets, purses, and coin jars. To the average American, they were nothing more than another quarter. But time has a strange way of changing ordinary objects into extraordinary collectibles. More than 4 decades have passed since these coins were first released. During that time, countless 1985 quarters have been scratched, damaged, cleaned, bent, or simply worn smooth through decades of circulation. Every trip through a vending machine, every fall onto concrete, and every year spent rubbing against other coins slowly erased a little more of their original beauty. That simple fact has created one of the biggest reasons collectors search for the 1985 Washington quarter today. Finding one that still looks almost exactly the way it did on the day it left the mint is becoming increasingly difficult. When collectors discover a beautifully preserved example, excitement builds immediately. Bright original mint luster, sharp details, and clean surfaces separate these exceptional coins from the millions that spent their lives in circulation. Professional grading services understand just how rare those survivors have become. Every coin is carefully examined under powerful lighting. The graders inspect Washington's portrait. They study the lettering. They check the fields for contact marks. They evaluate the strike quality. Even the smallest imperfection matters. A tiny scratch invisible to most people can lower the final grade. That's why collectors become so excited whenever a high-grade example appears for sale. Competition begins almost immediately. Sometimes several bidders want the very same coin. Each collector hopes to add one of the finest known examples to their collection. As bidding continues, prices often climb far beyond what most people believe possible for a modern quarter. But condition isn't the only reason these coins attract attention. The real excitement begins when collectors discover unusual mint errors. Every Washington quarter starts as a blank metal disc. That blank travels through enormous minting equipment, capable of producing thousands of coins every hour. Most of the time, the process works perfectly, but occasionally something unexpected happens. A die begins wearing unevenly. Grease blocks part of the design. The collar shifts slightly during striking. A placket enters the press at the wrong angle. Those brief moments create coins unlike the millions surrounding them. One fascinating variety collectors always search for involves die deterioration. As minting dies continue striking hundreds of thousands of coins, they slowly wear down. The fine details begin softening. Letters may appear thicker than normal. Certain parts of the design lose sharpness. To someone unfamiliar with coin collecting, these differences seem insignificant. To experienced collectors, however, they reveal the life story of the die itself. Each stage of wear becomes another chapter in the production process. Collectors enjoy comparing these stages because no two worn dies age exactly the same way. Another feature worth examining is the date. The numbers should appear bold, sharp, and evenly formed. Under magnification, collectors inspect every curve and every edge. If unusual doubling appears, the coin deserves much closer attention. True doubled dies are created during the manufacturing of the die itself. That means every coin struck from that die carries the exact same unusual characteristics. Although genuine doubled dies are uncommon, discovering one immediately changes the conversation. Instead of simply being another 1985 quarter, the coin becomes a documented variety with real collector interest. Then there are struck-through errors. These occur when foreign material accidentally comes between the die and the blank placket. During striking, grease, small metal fragments, or other debris may prevent part of the design from transferring completely. The result is an unusual-looking coin with missing or weakened details in specific areas. Many people mistake these coins for damaged examples. Collectors know that genuine struck-through errors tell an entirely different story. They represent a brief moment inside the mint when something interrupted the normal striking process. That tiny interruption created a collectible error impossible to reproduce intentionally. Another important area to inspect is the edge. Every standard clad quarter should display a thin copper-colored layer, visible between the outer nickel surfaces. Collectors always check this feature carefully. If something looks unusual, additional examination becomes necessary. Sometimes the difference is completely normal. Other times, it may indicate a missing clad layer or another unusual minting characteristic. Those possibilities are exactly why experienced collectors never examine only the front and back of a coin. Every surface matters. Every detail deserves attention. Even something as simple as the edge can reveal clues invisible anywhere else. Now imagine searching through an old family coin jar that's been sitting untouched for 30 years. Hundreds of coins spill across the table. Pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. At first, everything looks completely ordinary. But after several minutes of careful searching, one particular 1985 quarter catches your eye. Its surfaces seem brighter. Its strike appears stronger. The lettering looks unusually crisp. You compare it with another 1985 quarter lying nearby. The differences become obvious. Suddenly, what looked like another ordinary coin begins telling a completely different story. That moment of discovery is exactly what keeps collectors searching year after year. Because no one ever knows when the next remarkable coin will appear. And sometimes, the greatest treasure is hiding in the very next coin you pick up. The excitement of searching for rare quarters doesn't end with mint errors or high grades. In many cases, the biggest surprises come from coins that spent years unnoticed before someone finally realized what they were holding. Stories like these continue to inspire collectors because they prove that valuable discoveries don't always happen at auctions or inside expensive collections. Sometimes they begin in the most ordinary places imaginable. Several experienced collectors have shared stories of searching through thousands of quarters without finding anything unusual. Roll after roll revealed nothing more than ordinary circulation coins. Hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks. Then, without warning, one coin stood out from the rest. It wasn't because it looked dramatically different. In fact, the differences were almost impossible to notice unless you knew exactly what to look for. The surfaces reflected light differently. The strike looked unusually sharp. The lettering appeared stronger than normal. The rim was perfectly formed. That single moment of curiosity led to further examination, professional grading, and eventually the realization that the coin was far scarcer than anyone first believed. Moments like that remind collectors why patience is one of the most valuable tools in the hobby. Searching through coins isn't a race. It's a treasure hunt. Every handful of change represents another opportunity. Every bankroll could contain something unexpected. Every forgotten coin jar deserves a second look. Now, let's discuss another detail that many beginners overlook completely: the sound of a coin. Although modern Washington quarters are made from a copper core with nickel outer layers, experienced collectors sometimes compare the sound produced when two coins are gently tapped together. While sound alone can never confirm rarity or authenticity, an unusual tone may encourage a closer inspection, especially if other unusual characteristics are already present. It's simply another observation that experienced collectors file away before making a final judgment. Another important habit is comparing coins side by side. Instead of examining only one quarter, collectors place several examples from the same year next to each other. Immediately, differences begin to appear. One strike may look much sharper. Another coin may have noticeably brighter luster. The spacing between letters may seem slightly different because of die wear. Small cracks may appear on only one example. These comparisons help collectors recognize details that would otherwise go unnoticed. The more coins you examine, the easier it becomes to recognize when something looks unusual. Experience trains the eye. That's why longtime collectors often notice details within seconds that beginners might overlook completely. But even experts know one important rule: never assume every unusual coin deserves careful research before reaching a conclusion. Many forms of damage can resemble genuine mint errors coins that have been squeezed, drilled, polished, or exposed to chemicals often display strange appearances that confuse inexperienced collectors. At first glance they may look valuable. Closer examination usually tells a different story. That is why professional authentication remains so important. Whenever a potentially valuable coin is discovered, independent grading services carefully examine every detail using specialized equipment and years of experience. Their opinion provides confidence to both buyers and sellers. Without authentication, determining true value becomes much more difficult. Now imagine inheriting a collection assembled decades ago. Several albums sit inside an old wooden cabinet. Most of the coins are labeled carefully. Others remain loose inside small envelopes with handwritten notes. As you slowly turn each page, decades of American history unfold before your eyes. Pennies from the 1940s, nickels from the 1950s, silver, dimes. Half dollars. Then an entire page of Washington quarters appears. Among them rests a bright 1985 example that seems almost untouched. The coin has probably remained inside that album since the day it was purchased. No scratches from circulation. No cleaning. No polishing. Just decades of careful storage. Collectors Understand how rare such preservation has become. Coins like these remind us that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't discovered underground or inside forgotten vaults. Sometimes they were quietly protected by someone who appreciated them long before the rest of the world recognized their importance. As fascinating as the 1985 Washington quarter has become, another year from the same decade continues to capture the attention of collectors for entirely different reasons. At first glance, it seems almost identical. Millions were produced, millions entered circulation, millions were spent without anyone giving them a second thought. Yet hidden among those ordinary coins are examples that continue to surprise collectors whenever they appear. The next chapter of our journey takes us to another remarkable year, 1989. At first, there was nothing about the 1989 Washington quarter that suggested it would one day become a favorite among modern coin collectors. It looked almost identical to the quarters that came before it. Millions left the Philadelphia and Denver mints, entered circulation, and quickly became part of everyday American life. They passed through grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, movie theaters, laundromats, and shopping malls without attracting the slightest attention. For most people, it was simply another quarter. But collectors rarely judge a coin by its first impression. Instead, they ask questions. Has this coin survived in exceptional condition? Does it display an unusual strike? Could it contain a hidden mint error? Has a rare die variety been discovered? These questions are exactly what transformed certain 1989 Washington quarters from ordinary pocket change into highly desirable collectibles. One reason collectors continue searching for these coins is simple. Most 1989 quarters spent decades in heavy circulation. Think about everything an average quarter experiences during 40 years of use. It slides across store counters, drops onto concrete sidewalks, disappears beneath car seats, rattles around inside cash drawers, scrapes against keys and other coins every single day. With every small impact, the original mint surface slowly changes. Tiny scratches begin appearing. The brilliant luster starts fading. Fine details gradually soften. Eventually, the coin becomes just another well-used piece of pocket change. Finding one that somehow escaped all of that damage is becoming increasingly difficult. That is exactly why collectors become excited whenever they discover a beautiful, high-grade 1989 quarter. Some survived because they were placed inside coin albums shortly after leaving the mint. Others remained sealed inside original bank rolls for decades. A few were simply forgotten inside old collections until years later, when someone finally opened the box and rediscovered them. Every one of those survival stories adds to the coin's appeal. Collectors understand that preserving a modern coin in nearly perfect condition for decades is far more difficult than many people imagine. Professional grading companies carefully examine these coins under powerful lights and magnification. They inspect every surface, every letter, every number, every tiny contact mark. They study the strength of the strike, the quality of the luster, and the overall eye appeal before assigning a final grade. Sometimes two coins appear almost identical, yet one receives a noticeably higher grade because of details invisible to the average person. Those small differences often create dramatic differences in value. Another fascinating aspect of the 1989 Washington quarter involves mint errors. Although most coins were produced exactly as intended, a small number escaped the mint with unusual characteristics. These unexpected mistakes continue attracting collector interest decades later. One error collectors always hope to discover is a broad strike. Normally, a collar surrounds the coin during striking, creating the proper diameter and forming the reeded edge. If that collar fails to function correctly, the metal spreads outward when struck. The result is a coin that appears wider than normal while missing its usual edge detail. Broad-struck coins are immediately recognizable once placed beside an ordinary quarter. Their unusual appearance makes them popular with collectors because the error is easy to see without magnification. Another possibility involves strike-through errors. During the minting process, a small piece of debris, grease, or another foreign object may briefly come between the die and the blank placket. When the coin is struck, part of the design fails to transfer completely. Instead of a sharp image, a smooth or missing area appears where the obstruction interrupted the strike. Each struck-through error is unique because no two pieces of debris create exactly the same pattern. Collectors appreciate these coins because they capture a brief moment when the normal minting process was interrupted. One tiny accident created a one-of-a-kind result. Another feature experienced collectors inspect carefully is die chips. As minting dies age, tiny pieces of hardened steel occasionally break away. Those missing fragments create raised lumps on every coin struck afterward. To someone unfamiliar with mint errors, these raised areas may appear meaningless. Experienced collectors recognize them as evidence of a die that continued working despite developing damage. Some die chips remain extremely small. Others become large enough to attract immediate attention. Each one helps tell the story of the D's gradual wear throughout its working life. Collectors also compare multiple 1989 quarters side by side. Doing so often reveals subtle differences impossible to notice when examining only a single coin. One example may display stronger details. Another may have brighter original luster. A third might show evidence of an unusual die state. These comparisons sharpen a collector's eye and make future discoveries much easier. That is why experienced numismatists rarely examine just one coin at a time. Comparison is one of the most valuable tools in the hobby. And sometimes, the smallest difference becomes the biggest discovery. The smallest difference becomes the biggest discovery. That simple idea has guided coin collectors for generations. While most people glance at a coin for only a second before spending it, experienced collectors may spend several minutes studying a single piece. They understand that patience often reveals details invisible to the casual observer. Take a close look at the lettering on a 1989 Washington quarter. Is every letter sharp? Does the word Liberty appear crisp and evenly struck? Is "In God We Trust" fully visible without weakness? Does the date show clean, well-defined numbers? These may seem like small details, but collectors know they can reveal a surprising amount about how a coin was struck. The next step is examining Washington's portrait. Notice the hair above the forehead. Look carefully at the ribbon behind the head. Study the jawline and neck. On a heavily circulated coin, many of these fine details become smooth after years of wear. But on a well-preserved example, every feature remains bold and distinct, almost exactly as it appeared when the coin first left the mint. Collectors call this appeal. It's the overall impression a coin gives the moment someone sees it. A coin with bright original luster, a strong strike, and very few contact marks naturally attracts more attention than one that appears dull or heavily worn. Sometimes eye appeal alone is enough to create fierce competition among collectors. Now imagine attending a major coin show. Hundreds of dealers fill a large convention hall. Glass display cases stretch as far as the eye can see. Inside them are coins from every period of American history. Gold coins, silver dollars, ancient coins, commemorative issues. And among those impressive displays sits a small case dedicated entirely to Washington quarters. At first glance, every coin looks nearly identical. But as collectors gather around the display, conversations begin. One points out a remarkable strike. Another notices unusually vibrant mint luster. Someone else recognizes a rare die state that only a handful of specialists have documented. To an outsider, they're simply discussing ordinary quarters. To collectors, they're examining tiny pieces of American history. Every coin represents a different story. Every die carried its own characteristics. Every production run left behind small clues for future generations to discover. That constant search for hidden details is what makes coin collecting so rewarding. No matter how much someone learns, there's always another variety waiting to be discovered. Another die crack waiting to be documented. Another beautifully preserved coin waiting to appear after decades in storage. Another forgotten collection waiting to surprise an entire family. Some of the most exciting discoveries happen completely by accident. A homeowner cleaning an attic finds an old cigar box filled with coins. A family sorting through inherited belongings uncovers several unopened bank rolls. Someone purchasing loose change from a local bank notices one unusually bright quarter, mixed among hundreds of ordinary coins. These moments happen because valuable coins rarely announce themselves. They wait quietly until someone decides to look a little closer. That is perhaps the greatest lesson every collector learns. Never judge a coin too quickly. The most ordinary-looking quarter may have the most extraordinary story. Before placing any unusual coin back into circulation, compare it with another example from the same year. Study both carefully. Check the weight if possible. Look at the edge. Examine the strike. Notice the luster. The more comparisons you make, the easier it becomes to recognize when something truly unusual appears. Knowledge becomes your greatest advantage. Experienced collectors weren't born recognizing valuable coins. They developed those skills one coin at a time. Every discovery taught another lesson. Every mistake improved their understanding. Every hour spent examining coins sharpened their ability to notice details others missed completely. That's exactly why new collectors should never become discouraged. Every expert once began with a single coin and a simple question. Could this one be special? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it's an interesting variety. And once in a while, the answer surprises everyone. Now that we've explored the hidden stories behind the 1984, 1985, and 1989 Washington quarters, it's time to compare these 3 years side by side. Which one offers the best opportunity for collectors? Which errors are the most exciting? And what should you check first whenever one of these quarters appears in your pocket change? Let's put them head to head and uncover what every collector should know before spending another Washington quarter. Let's compare these 3 Washington quarters and see why each one continues to attract attention from collectors across the country. While they may appear almost identical at first glance, each year has its own story, its own collecting challenges, and its own reasons for becoming desirable. The 1984 Washington quarter is often remembered for its strong collector interest in high-grade examples, because so many entered circulation immediately. Finding one with brilliant original luster and very few contact marks has become increasingly difficult. Collectors carefully inspect both Philadelphia and Denver mint examples, hoping to find coins with exceptional eye appeal and unusually sharp strikes. The 1985 Washington quarter tells a slightly different story. Although millions were produced, collectors frequently search this year for interesting die varieties, strike quality, and well-preserved examples that escaped decades of circulation. It reminds collectors that rarity isn't always created by low mintage. Sometimes rarity develops simply because very few coins survive in exceptional condition. Then comes the 1989 Washington quarter. Many collectors consider this one especially exciting because examples continue appearing in circulation even today. People still discover them inside bank rolls, inherited collections, and forgotten jars of loose change. Every discovery creates another opportunity to examine the coin for unusual characteristics before it disappears back into circulation. So, if someone handed you one quarter from each of these 3 years, Where should you begin? Start with the date. Confirm whether you're holding a 1984, 1985, or 1989 example. Next, look beneath the date. A small mint mark can immediately tell you where the coin was struck. A D indicates the Denver Mint. If no mint mark appears, the coin was struck in Philadelphia. That tiny detail becomes the starting point for every serious examination. Now slowly rotate the coin beneath a bright light. Watch how the surface reflects. Does the luster move smoothly across the fields like a spinning cartwheel? Or does the surface appear dull after years of circulation? Collectors pay close attention to this because original mint luster is one of the first signs of an exceptionally preserved coin. Next, inspect the lettering. Every letter should appear bold and clearly defined. Pay close attention to Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date. Any unusual doubling, distortion, or weakness deserves a closer look. After that, examine Washington's portrait. Notice the fine details within the hair. Study the cheek, jawline, and neck. On higher grade examples, these areas remain remarkably sharp. Heavily circulated coins often lose these details first. Now flip the coin over. Study the eagle carefully. Look at the feathers. Inspect the wings. Notice the arrows and olive branches. Sharp, reverse details often indicate a stronger overall strike. Collectors appreciate coins displaying excellent detail on both sides because it reflects high-quality production. The rim deserves attention as well. It should appear complete and evenly formed all the way around the coin. Weak or unusual rims sometimes encourage collectors to investigate further. Although many irregularities result from damage after leaving the mint, genuine mint errors occasionally produce unusual rim characteristics that become highly collectible. Another habit experienced collectors develop is checking every coin under magnification. A simple 10-power loop often reveals details impossible to see with the naked eye. Tiny die cracks. Minute die chips. Small areas of doubling. Microscopic imperfections. These details frequently determine whether a coin is ordinary or worthy of further research. Many beginners ask an important question: how can I tell whether my quarter is actually valuable? The answer is surprisingly simple. Don't rely on only one characteristic. Instead, look for a combination of factors: excellent preservation, strong original, luster, sharp strike quality, possible mint errors, unusual varieties, professional authentication. When necessary, the more positive characteristics a coin possesses, the greater its potential collector interest. Perhaps the greatest mistake people make is assuming every old coin must automatically be valuable. Age alone rarely determines value. Many old coins remain common because enormous numbers survived. Likewise, some modern coins become surprisingly valuable because very few exceptional examples still exist. Knowledge always matters more than age. That's one reason the hobby remains so fascinating. Every coin tells a different story. Every discovery teaches something new. Every search offers another opportunity to uncover a hidden treasure hiding in plain sight. And sometimes that treasure has been sitting quietly inside your own pocket all along. And sometimes that treasure has been sitting quietly inside your own pocket all along. One of the most interesting things about coin collecting is that the hobby is constantly changing. Every year, new discoveries are made. Collectors identify previously unknown die varieties. Better technology allows experts to examine coins more closely than ever before. Coins that were once ignored suddenly receive new attention after researchers publish fresh information or collectors report unusual examples. That's one reason experienced numismatists never stop learning. They read books, they compare photographs, they attend coin shows, they study auction catalogs. Most importantly, they continue examining coins because they know the next important discovery may not come from a museum or a professional dealer. It may come from an ordinary person searching through pocket change. Imagine walking into your local bank on a quiet afternoon. You ask the teller if they have any customer apt rolls of quarters. The teller smiles and places several rolls on the counter. To everyone else standing in line, they're simply rolls of change. To a collector, they're unopened mystery boxes. Every roll holds 40 quarters. Every quarter has a story. Every coin deserves a careful look. Hours later, after searching through hundreds of quarters, you may find absolutely nothing unusual. Or the very last coin could completely change your day. That uncertainty is exactly what keeps collectors searching year after year. No treasure map. No guarantee. Only patience, knowledge, and curiosity. Many collectors compare the hobby to fishing. Some days you return home empty-handed. Other days you discover something you'll never forget. The important thing is continuing to look. Another fascinating aspect of coin collecting is how family history often becomes part of the hobby. Grandparents introduce grandchildren to old coin albums. Parents teach children how to recognize mint marks. Families search through loose change together around the kitchen table. Those simple moments create memories that last a lifetime. Sometimes the collection itself becomes more valuable. Other times, the memories become the greatest treasure of all. That's one reason coin collecting has remained popular for generations. It isn't simply about money. It's about history. It's about curiosity. It's about learning to notice details that everyone else overlooks. Every coin passed from one person to another carries a silent journey. Think about how many hands touched a single quarter during 40 years. A cashier in New York, a truck driver in Texas, a student buying lunch in California, a tourist visiting Florida, a family stopping at a gas station somewhere in the Midwest. That same quarter may have traveled thousands of miles before finally reaching your hand. Very few everyday objects have stories like that. Coins quietly connect generations without anyone realizing it. And every now and then, one of those ordinary travelers turns out to be far more valuable than anyone expected. If you're lucky enough to discover a quarter that appears unusual, resist the temptation to clean it. This is one of the biggest mistakes beginners make. A coin covered with natural toning or decades of age may actually be far more desirable than one that's been polished until it shines. Cleaning removes original surfaces forever. Professional collectors can recognize clean coins almost immediately. Instead of increasing value, cleaning often reduces it significantly. The safest decision is always the simplest one. Leave the coin exactly as you found it. Handle it carefully by the edges whenever possible. Store it in a protective holder. If you believe you've found something truly unusual, consider having it examined by a professional grading service. That small step can provide confidence, authenticity, and a much better understanding of what your coin may actually be worth. Before spending any older Washington quarter, take just a few extra seconds to examine it. Look at the date, check the mint mark. Study the strike, inspect the edge. Notice the luster. Compare it with another example if possible. Those few moments could prevent you from accidentally spending a remarkable collectible. Remember, most valuable discoveries don't happen because someone was lucky. They happen because someone paid attention. Knowledge creates opportunity. Curiosity leads to discovery. patience, rewards the collector. And those three qualities have built some of the most impressive coin collections in the world. Whether your journey begins with a single 1984 quarter, a bright 1985 example, or a surprisingly well-preserved 1989 Washington quarter, every collection starts exactly the same way. One coin, one careful look, one simple question. Could this be something special? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it's an interesting conversation piece. And sometimes it's the discovery every collector dreams of making. If today's journey through the 1984, 1985, and 1989 Washington quarters has changed the way you look at your pocket change, then the mission of this video has been accomplished. From now on, every quarter you receive carries a little more mystery than it did before. The next one could simply buy a cup of coffee, or it could become the most exciting coin you've ever found. So keep your eyes open, keep learning, and never underestimate the coins hiding in plain sight. If you enjoyed this video and want to discover more hidden treasures, rare mint errors, fascinating coin history, and incredible collector stories, make sure to subscribe to Hidden Coin Digest and turn on notifications so you never miss a future discovery. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the smallest coin carries the biggest surprise.